the clock is obviously ticking for Sean Payton, but his resume is extremely impressive. I mean, not just with New Orleans, even his resume as an offensive coordinator for the New York Giants. I mean, he had, 2 or 3 years where he produced top 10 offenses out of the New York Giants, who in the early 2000s were not loaded like the New Orleans Saints. I mean, so if nothing else, he's got a job as an OC for the rest of his life wherever he wants to go. And probably as a head coach to one of these other teams like the Jaguars, who might want to come out and spend $15 million a year on the guy. Who knows? Now, I will say this, though. Sure, the guy might leave, simply out of money, or I don't think that Sean's a saint as much as I like Sean as a coach. I think the guy will do whatever he can to put extra dollars in his pocket and make himself more comfortable. And I'm not mad at him for it, because as Brandon Cooks has taught us this year, this is a business. So I don't buy into it, because I think it's a lot of hype. Now, should we keep losing, say we do another 7-9 season, then yeah, I think it'll become a mutual thing where all parties realize, look, this run's come to an end and it's time to end it. But right now, I've heard nothing legitimate from anybody I know. I'm obviously not on the same level as an NBC exec or CBS Sports. I'm nowhere near those people. I'm nowhere near even Ian Rappaport. But everybody I know in New Orleans who has any somewhat connection to the Superdome and the Saints, there's not a legitimate concern about him leaving.
Because even when you listen to Ian, or not when you listen, but when you read the Ian Rappaport, he said it's not imminent and not probable, but it's possible. It was almost like, well, you basically just said nothing, because you told me, yeah, it could happen, but it might not happen. It's like he basically said nothing. I understand that. And when it comes to, guys like Andy Reid and Pete Carroll and all these guys, my point is that you never see teams go after winning coaches. It's if you compare it to the college game, who's always linked to the bigger jobs? Let's say right now, outside of Nick Saban, every school in the SEC was open. The that's going to be in line for the bigger name schools, you're going to hear guys like Tom Herman, P.J. Fleck, David Shaw. You're going to hear those guys moving on from their programs over to the bigger programs of the SEC. Those winning coaches are the guys that are getting pulled. You know who's not getting pulled? Guys who are going to Georgia Southern and going 4-8 every year. You don't hear those guys being named. But if you look at the NFL equivalent of that, that's what always happens. You always hear about guys who don't win resurfacing somewhere else as if they're going to just start winning all of a sudden. Now, Sean Payton is a great offensive mind, no doubt about it. And his stops at OC, he's had his issues. He had a good offense, but he's also had play calling duty stripped from him both times he was offensive coordinator. But that's not changing the fact that he's a great offensive mind, probably the best in football, as you alluded to. The issue that I'm having with it is that why not go after winning coaches? Like it seems like the NFL wants to go after perennial losers, and I don't understand that. Sean Payton hasn't had 3 out of the last 4 seasons hasn't had a winning season, but this is the hottest coaching candidate on the market. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, look who you're comparing him to, too. I mean, Sean Payton's got a 59% win percentage as a head coach. That's better than almost every head coach that takes the field. I mean, yeah, he's had a rough 3 or 4 seasons, but overall, compared to the rest of the field, he's better than them.
I mean, he may just be, but my point is that you're not hearing those guys being named either. You're hearing Sean Payton. So point, I guess my point in a nutshell would be, if Sean Payton has almost a 60% win percentage, great. How much of that win percentage was with Greg Williams? Because that's when Sean Payton was great. 2006, good year. 2007, 2008, he sucked. 2009, he won. 2010, average. 2011, they won. 2012, he was gone. 2013, average. 2014, 15, and 16, average. The only time most people elite was with Greg Williams.
Here's the thing, though. I think most people in the NFL, higher-ups and coaches and staff, understand and know that there's not a such thing with the exception of the guy that we have to keep naming, Bill Belichick, who is proficient and strong in both areas of the game. Name a head coach who's strong consistently year in and year out on offense and on defense. It just doesn't exist. I mean, Rex Ryan, who he's now going to be talked about in the head coaching market now that he's been released from the Bills. He's got I think it's like a 48% win percentage for his career, yet he's the defensive guy. He's never paired up with a great offensive guy. The exception will probably be the 2010 Jets, that one year that Sanchez looked like he was going to be a decent quarterback, stuff like that. So they're going to judge Sean Payton not necessarily entirely on his record, but how he has done in terms of what he is good at. And when you look at it from that, he has had one combined from his offensive coordinator years and head coach where he did not produce an offense that was rated in the top 10. One season. Find anybody that beats that track record, they're going to be ahead of him in the head coaching position. And I think it alludes to what you're saying. I mean, the reason he's in this discussion so much is because he's been with the team 10 years and they're starting to taper off. They're starting to do that consistent 7-9, not producing playoff years. Anytime that happens, no matter who it is, Andy Reid in Philadelphia, or God, I'm losing. I mean, Jack Del Rio and the Jaguars, who's now moved completely across the coast. Anytime that consistently starts happening, these guys leave. And then usually the good ones bounce back and have some good years after that with a new team. I just simply think that's what people are seeing, because anybody that looks at his resume, they want Sean Payton. They might want to overpay him as an OC, or they might want to sacrifice what they have and put him as head coach, because anybody in today's NFL wants his offense. Anybody, because you cannot name me another person who has every year except for one, which was his first year as an OC, where he did not produce a top 10 offense. Everybody in the NFL is going to want that guy to run their offense. Everybody.
It's one thing to run an offense. It's another thing to run a team. And don't get me wrong, I agree with you. Sean Payton, brilliant. Do I want Sean Payton coaching any other team but the New Orleans Saints? Absolutely not. However, if we're going to look at the glass or his resume, let's look at his full resume. Sean Payton, outside of Sean Payton with Greg Williams, has been a very average coach. His best years have been with Greg Williams. Okay, 2006 was the anomaly. But every year afterwards he's had any real success, it's been because of Greg Williams, except for the 2013 season, in which they were mediocre at best.
But see, that's all based off team success. And yeah, that's a big part of being a head coach. But everybody's going to know and understand the fact that there's only a certain number of head coaches in the NFL that are in that elite category, and very few defensive coordinators who are in that. And there's not a lot of defensive minds who are head coaches. Most defensive minds stick to being a coordinator, or they become head coaches that aren't that great, like a Rex Ryan. And you have offensive-minded people who are head coaches in the NFL. Most coaches that you're going to name off in the NFL today are offensive-minded head coaches. Almost every single one of them.
Here's the thing, though, Deuce. What most coaches in the NFL, you can't, like most. If I ask you who's the defensive coordinator in Kansas City, you could probably name him because you're more of a football aficionado than most. Most can't name the DC in Kansas City. Most can't tell you who Seattle's defensive coordinator is now. And I can almost bet you nobody will guess who New England's defensive coordinator is right now. And if you look at the winning teams that are in the NFL right now, you know the head coach. You do not know the defensive coordinator. So my point for saying that is that Sean Payton is he's one of the elite, but his best years came about when he had a defensive coordinator that was adequate. His other years, mediocre at best, and most of them, failing seasons. So for me, if I'm looking for a head coach, Sean Payton is starting to taper off. Yes, he's been with the Saints for 10 years. But I just don't understand the logic of saying, I'm going to go and snatch the coach that's at 7-9 instead of going and get the coach that's at 9-7 or greater. It's almost a flawed logic. Tom Herman got the job at UT because he won at Houston, not because he lost. I mean, imagine Nick Saban being a perennial loser and then getting a job at Alabama.
I mean, we're not talking about a perennial loser. Sean, I mean, 7-9 might be bad by Saints standards because of what Sean Payton did for us 2006 and up. And I understand the Greg Williams argument, but we're not talking about a Hugh Jackson. I mean, we're not talking
mediocre.
We're not talking about a Doug Marrone. We're not talking about even an Adam Gase. I mean, we're talking about Sean Payton.
Mike Smith for the Atlanta Falcons won consistently and was still canned. Still canned. How many coaches in the NFL? Another coach, Andy Reid. Andy Reid was a winner in Philadelphia. Still got canned. John Gruden was a winner. Then he got canned when he had a couple of bad seasons. But the idea of it is most good head coaches get canned when they're good because somebody comes along and says, you know what? You're good, but I don't know if you can get us over the hump. So they fire that guy and they go get another guy.
Well, no, I think that goes back to what you're talking about because Mike Smith tapered off, and now he's basically – I don't even know what he's doing now. I think he went back to college.
No, he's a defensive coordinator at Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Okay, so he's with Tampa. So one of the ones I did not know where he went right now. But he also, the final 2 seasons in Atlanta, won a combined 10 games in 2 years. I mean, so he was doing well, but then he just completely nosedived. I mean, Andy Reid did very well for a long time. But then he completely nosedived, and that's why he got kicked out.
They wanted Andy Reid gone simply because of his inability to win the big game. I don't think Andy Reid, this is my personal opinion. Andy Reid could have got to the NFC Championship game 6 years in a row. Because he could never get past the NFC Championship game except that one time, they wanted him gone. Because you're good enough to get us there, but you're not good enough to get us over the hump. My point is this, and it's going to remain the same. Sean Payton is elite. I don't want to make this seem like I'm knocking a guy for being a great coach, because that's not how I feel. I believe he's a great coach. He's the best offensive mind in football. I want him as the coach of the Saints. However, if I'm the Los Angeles Rams, if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, if I'm one of these teams, the now the Buffalo Bills, if I'm one of these teams that need a head coach, I'm not starting with Sean Payton. If I'm looking for a winner, can Sean Payton win? Absolutely. But there are about 4 or 5 guys I can name right now before Sean Payton that have never – Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, and he never gets mentioned for another job. Why is that? Why is it in the NFL the guys who win consistently are never thought to be leaving, but the guys who are average or elite at one good thing always seem to be the guys right in line for another job? That's my point of view. Than outside. Let's take the Saints away from it to where it's not as much of a to your heart topic. If we're talking about UCLA and the head coach of UCLA consistently every year 6-6, 6-6, 6-6, yeah, you get into the bowl game, but you're just 6-6. Now imagine that guy becoming a head coach fighting time. You're gonna scratch your head like, what the hell is going on? We're talking about a guy that only went 6-6. Well, I think he's like LSU. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about for the NFL with Sean Payton. Sean Payton goes 7-9 3 years in a row. He's the hottest coaching candidate on the market, even though he's not on the market. Mike Tomlin never nobody fits him. Doesn't that seem a little bit odd to you? Pete Carroll, I don't think, has had a losing season in Seattle since he's taken over. Never mentioned as a hot head coaching candidate that teams are going to want to go after. That seems odd. I know you're not going to check out of New England.
Well, here's my thing, man. A lot of the guys that you're mentioning haven't gone past, and I've said this for years, there is like this unspoken rule that coaches don't make it to 10 years, let alone past 10 years in the NFL. Sean Payton has simply eclipsed that mark. I mean, Pete Carroll, how long has he been in Seattle now? 6 years? 7 years?
I want to say 6 or 7.
6 or 7. One really great Super Bowl season. NFC champions lost the next year. 2015 they went 10-6.